I didn't mean to notice that her door was unlocked. That's the part one keep replaying. Most nights, my routine is predictable. I come home from work around 9, microwave whatever I bought from the corner store, and sit at the small kitchen table in my rented studio. The building is old, but clean. Quiet in a way that feels borrowed. You can hear pipes sighing in the walls if you listen long enough. Her apartment is across the hall. Mrs. Ramon, 46, divorced, owns the building, lives alone. I only know those details because she told me the day I moved in, standing with a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She wasn't cold, just careful, like someone who had learned to measure how much of herself to hand out. We usually cross paths in the mornings. She waters the plants by the staircase around 7:30. I leave for work at 7:40. The first time she asked what I did, I told her I worked in digital marketing. She nodded slowly, like she was translating it into something more human. "You look too thoughtful for marketing," she said. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. After that, she started remembering small things. That I don't drink sugar in my tea. That I work late on Thursdays. That I prefer emails to phone calls when it comes to rent reminders. It's strange, the intimacy of being known in fragments. Sometimes, when I'd come home late, I'd see her light on under the door. A thin gold line stretching across the hallway tiles. Once, she opened it just as I was unlocking mine. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah, you too." She shrugged, then smiled like she hadn't meant to. The building doesn't sleep. There are things you notice when you live alone. The way your phone stays face down because you already know no one texted. The way you type a message, read it twice, then delete it because it feels unnecessary. The way you sit with the TV on but muted. Loneliness isn't loud. It's procedural. Sometimes I'd stand at the sink washing a single plate and think about knocking on her door for no reason. Asking about the plumbing, the heater, anything. I never did. Until tonight. I came home earlier than usual. Rain had started, soft but steady, making the hallway smell faintly of damp concrete. I was shaking water from my jacket when I noticed her door wasn't fully shut. Not wide open, just not locked. A thin slice of warm light cut across the floor. I could hear low music inside. Something old and slow. I hesitated. Maybe she was carrying groceries. Maybe she forgot. Maybe it wasn't my business. My hand hovered near the wood. I don't know why I felt nervous. She's my landlady. I'm just a tenant. That's the rule. Clean lines. No blurring. But I knocked anyway. Soft. Just twice. The music lowered. I heard footsteps. Then her voice, not sharp, just surprised. "Yes. It's me," I said, suddenly aware of how that sounded. From across the hall, the door opened a little wider. She wasn't dressed for company. Just a loose gray sweater and black leggings. Her hair was down, slightly damp, like she'd just showered. No makeup. She looked younger without trying to. "Oh," she said, a small breath of relief leaving her. "I didn't realize." "Your door." I nodded toward the lock. "It wasn't." She glanced back and laughed quietly. "I must have forgotten." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just unguarded. "Thank you," she added. "Most people wouldn't have bothered." I shrugged, then folded the edge of my wet sleeve between my fingers, suddenly aware of where she was looking. Not at my face. At my hands. "Good night," she said softly. "Good night." She closed the door. This time, I heard the click of the lock. I stood there a moment longer than necessary. When I went inside my apartment, my phone buzzed before I could sit down. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I opened the message. "This is Mrs. Ramon." I realized I never asked, "Would you like some tea?" I made too much. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Because I wasn't sure if she meant tonight. I told myself I'd say no. I even typed it out. "Thank you, but I'm exhausted. Maybe another time." I stared at the message long enough for the screen to dim. Then I erased it. "Sure. Just for a bit," I sent instead. Her reply came almost instantly. "Doors open." That did something to me. The casualness of it. Like she trusted the hallway. Or me. I knocked lightly anyway before stepping in. Her apartment felt warmer than mine. Not just temperature, lived in. Books stacked on the coffee table. A folded throw blanket at the edge of the couch. The faint scent of cardamom in the air. "I wasn't expecting company," she said, almost apologetic, as she moved a pile of papers from one chair. Ignore the mess. It's not messy. She smiled like she didn't believe me. She poured tea from a stainless steel thermos into two mismatched mugs. I noticed her hands, steady, deliberate. No rings. A faint pale line where one used to be. We sat across from each other at the small dining table, knees almost touching, but not quite. For the record, she said, wrapping both hands around her mug, I don't usually invite tenants in. Should I be worried? She exhaled through her nose, amused. Probably. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't empty. The rain tapped against the window. Somewhere upstairs, a chair scraped across the floor. You ever regret moving here? She asked suddenly. I thought about that. About the city feeling too big some nights. About scrolling through contacts and realizing most names belong to a past version of me. Sometimes, I admitted. It's quieter than I expected. She nodded slowly. Quiet can be loud. I glanced up at her. She was looking at me like she understood something I hadn't said. My son used to fill this place, she continued, almost offhand. He's studying abroad now. The silence, it takes practice. I didn't know she had a son. How old? I asked. 22. I felt the number land between us. She noticed. Of course she did. He's stubborn, she added softly. Thinks he knows everything. I laughed before I could stop myself. That sounds familiar. Her gaze lingered a second too long. Not inappropriate. Just measuring. There it was, the thing we weren't naming. I'm 27. Closer to her son's age than hers. A tenant. Temporary. Replaceable. I imagined what this looked like from outside. The landlady and the guy across the hall, drinking tea too late. I imagined whispers in the stairwell. Imagined her pulling away first, deciding it wasn't worth the complication. You don't have to overthink it, she said quietly. I wasn't. You were, she countered, not unkindly. She stood and moved to the kitchen sink, rinsing her mug even though it was still half full. A small, restless movement. I forget sometimes, she said, her back to me, that I'm not just someone's mother, or someone's ex-wife, or someone's landlord. The vulnerability in that sentence surprised me. I don't see you like that, I said before I could edit myself. She turned, drying her hands slowly with a dish towel. How do you see me? I hesitated. My eyes dropped, not to her body, but to the way her fingers gripped the fabric. I don't know, I admitted. Just you. The room went very still. She stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel her warmth. She reached out, just briefly, and adjusted the collar of my damp shirt. You'll catch a cold, she murmured. Her fingers brushed my neck. It couldn't have been more than a second, but I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that night, something shifted. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else would notice. But the hallway felt narrower. Charged. 3 evenings in a row, we shared tea. Always casual. Always just for a few minutes. I started coming home earlier without admitting to myself why. She started leaving her door slightly open around 9. We never named it. On the 4th night, her door was closed. Locked. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to check a notification on my phone. The hallway light flickered faintly above me. I told myself I'd imagine the pattern. That this wasn't a routine. That I wasn't waiting for anything. The next morning, she was already watering the staircase plants when I stepped out. You've been busy, I said, trying to sound neutral. She didn't look up right away. Just catching up on things. Her tone was polite, measured. There was a distance in it that hadn't been there before. I nodded. Right. As I passed, I noticed she'd put her hair up. Formal. Composed. Landlady again. That night, I heard laughter from inside her apartment. A man's voice, older, confident. It carried through the wall in uneven bursts. I froze in my kitchen. It wasn't loud. Just present. I told myself it was none of my business. She was 46. Divorced. Allowed to have a life. The logic didn't help. I turned the TV on for noise. Muted it 5 minutes later. Around 10, there was a knock at my door. I opened it too quickly. It was her. Alone. He left, she said, before I could ask. My cousin. He's helping me refinance the building. I felt ridiculous for the relief that washed through me. Oh, she studied my face like she could see every thought I hadn't said. You thought? No, I cut in too fast. I didn't. She exhaled softly. Not amused. Not upset. Just aware. I should probably slow this down, she said. This. She glanced at her own door, then at mine. The invisible line between them. You're 27. I know how old I am. That's not what I meant. Her voice wasn't scolding. It was careful, like she was trying to return something fragile to a shelf before it fell. My son is 22, she added quietly. Do you understand how that feels? I did. And I didn't. I'm not him, I said. I know. A beat. That's the problem. Silence pressed in. The kind that makes your heartbeat noticeable. She stepped closer without meaning to. Or maybe she did. I couldn't tell anymore. I don't want you confusing attention with something else, she said. Loneliness can distort things. The word loneliness hung between us like it belonged to both of us. And what if it's not that? I asked softer now. Her eyes flicked to my mouth. Just briefly. Then back up. That's exactly what scares me, she whispered. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe neither of us. Maybe the space just closed on its own. We were close enough that I could feel her breath. Warm, steady. My hand hovered near her waist, but didn't land. Her fingers brushed my wrist, almost absent-mindedly. Testing. A pause. 1 inch closer, and it would have happened. Instead, she stepped back. I can't, she said. Not sharply, just firm. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about whether we wanted to cross the line. It was about who we would become if we did. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic about Tuesdays. I came home to find a notice taped neatly to my door. Building inspection, Friday. Units may be entered with prior notice. Her handwriting at the bottom. Precise. Controlled. I stared at it longer than necessary, then walked across the hall before I could talk myself out of it. She opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been standing there. About the inspection, she said before I spoke. It's routine. Are you selling the building? The question slipped out sharper than I intended. Her expression shifted, surprise first, then something softer. No. Refinancing then. Yes. I nodded, but the tightness in my chest didn't ease. I might have to raise rent next year, she added carefully. Just slightly. There it was. The future. Practical. Unromantic. I see. She studied me. You're upset. I'm just thinking. About moving. About her hallway light belonging to someone else. About another tenant standing where I stand. I can't build my decisions around you, she said quietly. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. The air felt thin. She grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. Walk with me, she said. Not a request. We ended up at the small park 2 blocks away. The benches were still damp from earlier rain. She brushed one with her sleeve before sitting, a pointless gesture. I sat beside her anyway. For a while, we just watched people pass. A father pushing a stroller. A couple arguing softly near the fountain. Ordinary lives moving forward without hesitation. I had a neighbor once, she said finally. After my divorce. He was kind. Too kind. I let myself depend on that. I kept my eyes on the gravel under my shoes. And? I asked. And when he moved away, I realized I hadn't been brave. I'd just been lonely. The word again. I'm not him, I said, though it sounded thinner this time. She turned to me fully. That's what makes this harder. Her knee brushed mine. Neither of us moved it away. I look forward to you coming home, she admitted. I time my evenings around it sometimes. My throat tightened. That's not nothing, she added quickly. But it's also not safe. Safe for who? For you. A beat. For me. The park lights flickered on overhead. Soft yellow halos in the dark. You think I don't know what I'm feeling? I asked. I think you might not know what it costs. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't care about the rent, I said. Or the building. Or what people think. That's because you're 27. There wasn't judgment in it. Just fact. I care about you, I said. The words landed between us, fragile and exposed. She went very still. Her hand shifted on the bench, fingers barely touching mine. Not gripping. Just there. You shouldn't, she whispered. Too late. Silence again. Heavy, but not empty. She looked at me the way someone looks at a door they know they shouldn't open. If I asked you to move out, she said softly, would you? The question hung between us. and I realized I didn't know which answer would hurt more. She didn't ask me to move out. But the next morning, there was an email. Subject, lease adjustment option short. Formal. She'd spoken to the bank. If I wanted, I could transfer to the smaller unit downstairs next month. Lower rent. Fewer complications. It might be more practical for you long term. No emojis. No soft edges. Just her full name at the bottom. I read it 3 times. Then once more, just to make sure I wasn't imagining the tone. Downstairs. Further away. I didn't reply. For 2 days, I barely saw her. The hallway light outside her apartment stayed off at night. Her door closed fully. Locked. No thin slice of gold across the tiles. On Thursday, I came home late on purpose. I didn't want to pass her on the stairs. Didn't want to look at her and pretend we were just landlady and tenant again. When I unlocked my door, I noticed something missing. The thermos she sometimes left outside her door while watering the plants, gone. The small routine we'd built, erased like chalk in rain. Friday evening, I ran into her by accident. Not in the hallway. In the lobby. She was standing with a man I'd never seen before. Early 50s. Well-dressed. Comfortable. The kind of man who didn't hesitate before taking up space. They were looking over renovation plans spread across the reception desk. She looked different. Composed. Professional. When she saw me, her posture shifted, just slightly. "This is Mr. Collett," she said. "He's advising me on the refinancing." Mr. Collett extended his hand. Firm grip. Evaluating eyes. "You live here?" he asked. "Across the hall," I said. "For now," she added too quickly. The words hit harder than they should have. I nodded, pretending I hadn't noticed. Later that night, I heard her laughing again through the wall. Not forced. Not awkward. Easy. I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling, phone balanced on my chest. I typed, "So that's it." Deleted. Typed again. "Are you pushing me away because you think I'll regret this?" Deleted. I tried something simpler. "I miss talking to you." My thumb hovered over send. Through the wall, I heard a faint clink of glasses. The murmur of voices lowering into something private. I imagined her sitting across from him the way she'd sat across from me. Hands wrapped around a mug. Listening carefully. Asking quiet questions. Maybe this was what she meant by safe. The next morning, there was a folded note slipped under my door. Not an email. Not formal. Just 3 lines in her careful handwriting. "I'm trying to make responsible decisions. Please don't mistake that for indifference. You deserve clarity." No signature. I sat on the edge of my bed with the paper in my hand, reading it like there was a hidden sentence between the lines. Responsible. Clarity. Deserve. They sounded like things adults say when they're already halfway out the door. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That evening, I stayed inside. At 9, I stood near my door, listening. No music. No laughter. Just silence on both sides of the wall. I thought about knocking. My hand even lifted once. Then I let it fall. And for the first time since that rainy night, her door stayed closed, and I didn't try to open it. On Sunday night, I knocked. Not because I had a plan. Not because I'd figured anything out. I just couldn't sit in the unfinished silence anymore. It took longer than usual for her to open the door. When she did, she looked like she hadn't been expecting anyone. Hair loose. Sweater sleeves pushed up. No makeup. Just her. "I thought you were avoiding me," she said quietly. I was. She stepped aside without another word. Her apartment felt the same, but not. The air heavier. The distance deliberate. The thermos sat on the counter, unopened. "I'm not moving downstairs," I said before I lost the nerve. She closed the door gently. "You don't have to decide that tonight." I already did. A pause. She leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folding, not defensive, just steadying herself. "Why?" she asked. "Because I don't want to feel replaced. Because I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. Because every time you pull away, it feels like I imagined all of it." "Instead," I said, "because I don't want practical. I want honest." Her eyes shifted slightly at that. Not wounded. Not angry. Just exposed. "You think I'm being dishonest. I think you're scared." The words settled between us. She exhaled slowly. "Of course I am." Silence. "I built this place after my marriage ended," she said. "Brick by brick. Stability. Reputation. Routine. I can't afford to be reckless. I'm not asking you to be reckless. You're asking me to risk something. Yes. Her jaw tightened, not in resistance, but in calculation. The weight of years I didn't carry. You'll leave one day, she said. Not accusing, just factual. For a job. For someone your own age. For a life that makes sense. You don't know that. I know how stories like this look from the outside. I stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to stop me. I'm not outside, I said. Her breath caught slightly. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. I don't need guarantees, I continued. I just need to know this wasn't a mistake you're correcting. Her gaze softened at that. It wasn't a mistake, she said, almost immediately. Then quieter. That's the problem. We stood there, two people measuring the cost of being seen. If I let this happen, she said carefully, it won't be casual. I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't want casual. You say that now. I'm still here. The room felt smaller. Or maybe we were just standing closer. She reached for the thermos, unscrewed the lid, then stopped halfway. A nervous habit. Something to do with her hands. I don't want to be your rebellion, she said. You're not. Or your lesson. You're not that either. A long pause. Then, softer than before, almost to herself, she asked, and what if I fall harder than you? The honesty in that question stripped everything else away. Then I'll stay, I said. Not dramatic. Just steady. She searched my face like she was looking for proof of something I couldn't manufacture. Finally, she stepped into me. Not rushed. Not desperate. Her forehead rested lightly against my chest. My hands hovered for a second, asking permission without words, then settled gently at her waist. We stayed like that. No kiss. No promise. Just breath shared in the quiet kitchen. After a moment, she gave a small, almost embarrassed smile against my shirt. Okay, she murmured. And somehow, that felt bigger than anything else she could have said. We didn't announce anything. There was no moment where she said, "This is official," and I didn't change my relationship status or tell anyone at work. We just stopped pretending. The next morning at 8:47 a.m., she was watering the staircase plants again. I stepped out of my apartment with my usual black coffee in hand. She glanced up, a little cautious at first. "Morning," she said. "Morning." I reached for the small metal watering can before she could bend down again. "You'll be late," she murmured. "I'll survive." She didn't argue. Just let me help. It became that simple. I didn't move downstairs. The email thread about the smaller unit quietly died. Mr. Khalid still came by sometimes, but less often. And when he did, I didn't feel like I was standing outside something anymore. We were careful, though. Not secretive. Just intentional. Sometimes we'd walk to the park after dinner, sitting on the same damp bench where she'd once asked if I'd move out. The first time we returned there after that night in her kitchen, neither of us mentioned it. But our knees touched, and neither of us moved away. "I still think you'll outgrow me," she said once, watching a jogger pass. "I still think you underestimate me," I replied. She smiled at that, the kind that doesn't need to win. There were adjustments. I learned that she wakes up at 3 a.m. sometimes, convinced she's forgotten something important. I learned to reach for her hand without asking questions. She learned that I go quiet when I'm overwhelmed, not distant, just sorting things out. She stopped filling that silence with fear. We didn't erase the age gap. We just stopped letting it speak louder than we did. On Thursdays, I still come home late. She leaves her door slightly open now, not as an invitation, just as a habit. Light spills into the hallway the way it did that first rainy night. Only now, I don't hesitate. I step inside like I belong there. Sometimes we drink tea from the thermos. Sometimes I make black coffee instead, and she pretends not to hate it. "Still no sugar?" she'll ask. Still no sugar. There are days we argue about small things, finances, paint colors for the lobby, whether I should take a job offer in another city. Real things. Adult things. But the fear that used to sit between us has softened. It's not gone. It just doesn't control the room anymore. A few weeks ago, we ran into her son on a video call. She introduced me without flinching. "This is him," she said simply. "Not tenant. Not neighbor. Just him." Later that night, as we sat at the kitchen table, she folded a napkin absent-mindedly. The same small motion I'd made the first time I drank tea here. You were right, she said. About what? That night at the park. She looked at me steadily. You were still here. I reached for her hand, not dramatically, just because it was there. I told you, I said. She leaned back in her chair, studying me the way she used to, like I was something she was still learning. Maybe we both are. Love didn't crash into our lives. It adjusted them, quietly, patiently. And sometimes, when I pass her in the hallway at exactly 8:47 a.m., sunlight catching in her hair, I think about the night her door wasn't locked. How close we came to walking away from something neither of us fully understood yet. Now, when she says good night, it doesn't sound like a boundary. It sounds like a promise we've already kept. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?